Hello and welcome back to my floor. Today we are doing the second half of my National Treasure Edge of History recap. And there's a lot going on. So for one, I brought my iPad instead of my laptop this time to look at my notes because it'll be easier to have it here instead of looking down on the ground over there. But yeah, I'm feeling a lot better this time. I've got a little more energy. I've got a lot more opinions, and there's a lot that goes on in the second half of the show. I do want to start by perhaps making some corrections. From what it sounds like in my other video, I said Daughters of the Blue Serpent. I believe it's Daughters of the Plumed Serpent, not blue, plumed. So that is a correction from last time. But other than that, let's start with a nice little recap. Where everyone is, what happened at the end of episode 5. So at the end of episode 5, they were at the governor's mansion at the ball, right? And this is where we saw Mina run off because she watched Ross and Jess dance. Mina ran off because she watched Ethan and Jess dance. Is like not upset about that. Tasha and Oren caused a distraction so Jess could run out. Jess is now in Billy's car and they have driven away. Liam has run off with the journal. We don't know what's up with him. Sadusky is still dead. Miles is kind of there, but like not important right now. And neither is Casey, Hendricks, Dr. Zeke. Ross, as a little update and reminder, has figured out that Sadusky's death was in fact murder due to a plant in his office. Also in the recap, they are looking for the Pan American treasure. They have to find 3 boxes to get to this treasure because the box is open and they make maps. So like that's also important. Anyway, let's get into episode 6. So after they drove off, Billy takes Jess to like a restaurant and basically is like, oh my god, never knew you were Raphael's daughter. Like, bestie, we should work together. And she like shows her all this stuff and talks about like how her brother was, whose name is Sebastian, which is not super important. She like shows Jess a photo of her brother and father together to be like, look, see, they worked together, they were friends, and we should work together too. She also shows her a medallion that matches Jess's, so one of these. And Jess agrees to go with Billy to look at the journal, the Meriwether Lewis journal, to help them decipher the next clue. She's a little suspicious, but like going along with it. So they go, and Casey and this other goon that's there are like really friendly, and she's like, this feels weird. I don't like it. And you know what? She's correct for that. At this point, it is also revealed that Billy is in possession of one of the boxes. So they now have 2 of them. And she claims that Liam sold it to her, even though he has said it went missing after his father's death. So they go through the clues, Jess figures it out, and it leads them to the Alamo. Now, they think they're going to find the 3rd box in the well of the Alamo. So that is their plan, is to go. So Jess goes home and starts an argument with Tasha about the scene she caused in the governor's mansion. It's like, that wasn't cool, you shouldn't have done that, blah, 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 blah. And Tasha's like, you told me to do it so you could get out. She's like, I don't see what the big problem is. You asked for this, so why are you getting mad about it? And then Tasha basically runs away to go to Oren's, aka Ethan's, because remember, Oren is living at Ethan's now. And they first of all, Disney really promotes their own movie in this, and they're watching The Winter Soldier, like Captain America the Winter Soldier. And then, because I think it's funny, because it's a PG-13 show, they won't like explicitly say anything. Tasha spends the night. But so that's what's happening over there. After Ethan hears about this fight and goes to check on Jess, right? He basically is like, you need to confront Liam, like in person. So Jess is like, you know what? I will do that. I will go be mean to Liam, my kind of boyfriend. And so she goes to his house. She goes into the clue room and she finds the entire place trashed. Upon finding this, she's also attacked from behind by this bearded, scruffy guy who's been following them. He's not actually super important to the plot, so like I haven't brought him up, but like they've been being followed. He just kind of follows them in a car. It's not important at all. It started at Graceland, like he showed up at the funeral. But magically, Casey arrives just in time to fight him off, and he jumps through a window. They're on the first floor. He jumps through a window. Like there was a door right there, sir. Anyway, and like Casey claims that this man works for Salazar, who we need to remember, beware of. We don't know who Salazar is. And she's like, Jess, Billy told me to watch your back, so that's why I'm here. During this time, Ethan goes to the hospital to talk to Mina, because she's like a med student or a doctor, I don't know, but like good for her. And she's like, you're in love with Jess, aren't you? And he's like, yeah, and I've been lying to myself about it, and like I'm so sorry, and also I never liked golf. And like she's really upset about this, which is like kind of funny, but she's just like, you couldn't even tell me you didn't like golf. Like, where did you think this was going? But they break up basically on pretty good terms, and she's like, you should tell Jess, right? But like, no, he shouldn't, because Jess is dating Liam. But while he's there, he notices as he's leaving some clothes taken from a patient's room, and among them is the tuxedo that Mr. Liam was wearing to the governor's ball. So this tuxedo is covered in blood, and Ethan like wears the patient, and he goes off and he finds Liam, who is on a ventilator and not well. So like Liam's alive, something has happened to Liam. So cut to on Billy's plane. Jess is looking at the sword of Cortez, and Billy's like, oh, it's just a replica. It's a reminder of all the atrocities committed against the daughters of the Plume Serpent. And Jess is smart. So Jess already suspects that Billy's lying, right? So she, during this plane ride, also is like, oh my gosh, since you know my parents, you must know about how much my mother loves soccer. And Billy like plays into it and says like, and this is how Jess confirms they're lying, because her mother hates soccer. Cut to Liam's hospital room. Liam and Ethan are hanging out. And by hanging out, I mean Ethan's like, hey, what happened? And Liam tells Ethan that he saw Billy show up, so he went to go get the journal before she could, but Casey grabbed him when he got out of the mansion, beat him up, threw him in the river, and left him for dead. Like, oh my gosh. So, cut back to the plane. What's their plan to get to the well at the Alamo? It's a big tourist destination, right? Their plan, because they don't fully have it on the plane, once they land, they find out there's going to be a reenactment of the Battle for the Alamo, right? So their plan is, while the first, I think they say 10 minutes takes place outside, that's when they're going to go in, dressed as reenactors, and try to get into the well. That's their entire plan. So they do this, and like they crank open the well, right? And Billy makes Jess go down, because obviously she doesn't trust her. And like the boxes have like some kind of magnet that help them to find the other boxes. There's a lot of magnets in the show. And I don't know how they all work. And it's like, can we not use magnets? Did we need to use magnets? But they kind of work as a compass, and they should like help you find the other boxes. And Jess goes, they're not here. And she like comes out, and Billy like does not believe her. He's like, we only have so much time. So Billy goes down and takes the bag that should have the boxes. Turns out that bag is still with Jess, and Casey at this point has left them alone because she had to go take care of a different problem. So while Billy is in the well, Jess closes it on her because it's covered with a grate, and they had to like lever it up. And lever it up. They had to use a lever to like open the grate. So she closes it on Billy and runs away. But as she was running away, Casey sees it, and Billy like has instructed her to get her. And she really gets away because she shoots off a gun and like says like Viva Mexico or something along those lines. and like gets all the the people reenacting the Mexican side like on her side because that's what she's dressed as, and like manages to just barely make it into Oren's van. She purposely got Tasha out of the house so she could go do this, but left her note telling her exactly what they were doing. I'm gonna be honest, I'm just a little confused about how they can drive from Baton Rouge to San Antonio in time for this, because they took a plane. So how are these two driving with enough time to get there in time, right? But they get in, Jess kind of catches them up and is like, hey, by the way, this is the wrong Alamo. The real Alamo we need to go to is the original like city of Alamo in Mexico. So that is their new plan. And after catching the group up, she also goes, but here's the issue. In Old Alamo, a bank was built over the well. And you'll never believe what happened. The bank was robbed. An explosive was used and exposed to the wall. The guy who did it was caught and is still in prison in Mexico. That guy is Salazar. So now they might have to go see Salazar in prison. They also have to go to Mexico, right? And as we covered previously, Jess has DACA. So when she does this, she cannot come back without like getting green cards and stuff. Like she has to stay in Mexico. So it's like a big decision for the group if they're actually going to go or not. At the end of this episode, we cut to Billy, who has been arrested because she was in the well illegally, and like they had like sedated they sedated one of the security guards, so like she's really going to jail for that. But as she's getting loaded into like her police van or whatever, she gives a signal to Casey, who has made it out, and is like, okay, call the real spy we have back home. And Casey calls Miles. And what does Miles do? Miles walks into the FBI to talk to Agent Ross and is like, by the way, here's this recording of Jess fighting with Sadusky right before his death. And that is how episode 6 ends. Episode 7 starts with Ross playing the audio recording, and Hendrix is like, perfect. This implicates her. She like basically tells him she's poisoned him in it. Go arrest Jess. But Ross is like, I don't know, something doesn't feel quite right. But like, she doesn't have enough evidence, so like she has to go arrest Jess. So at the same time, Jess is at this point decided she's going to cross the border to continue this treasure hunt. She has no other choice. Tasha is trying to convince her not to go because she's like, you can't come back if you go, and I don't want you to not come back. And they're just like, we have no other choice. Salazar is our only chance of stopping Billy, but like maybe he'll work with us to stop her. So like they've decided to go, and like Tasha and Oren are like, well, we're not letting you go alone, so we're going with you, and we're taking the van. The van goes so many places in this show. But just as they're getting ready to leave, they find out Jess has been accused of Sadusky's murder. Woo. So they've got to go like ASAP. They're scrambling to pack. Ethan shows up and is like, oh my gosh, you guys need to go. I'll stay here and I'll try to like do lawyer things. And during this packing time, we see Oren going through a bunch of his shoes boxes, which is like, Tasha's with him and she's like, what are you doing? You don't need this many sneakers. And he pulls out wads of cash. And like, it's this very sweet moment where he's like, I saved all this money in case Jess had to go. So like she had funds basically. And it's like this very sweet moment, but like Jess isn't there. It's a little odd. But during this time, Ethan also reveals to the group that Liam was framed and that he's in the hospital and was beaten up by Casey. So like everybody's all caught up. So cut to Billy, who is waiting to be released in Texas. And she is chatting with another woman who was arrested because the woman's like, this wasn't even the real Alamo or whatever. Like she's complaining that the historical reenactment's weird. And she learns from her that the real Alamo, the one that they were supposed to go to, is in Mexico. So now Billy also knows. So after they leave, Ross goes and searches Jess's apartment because she has a warrant. Ethan shows up and he's like, hi, so she didn't do it. And you know why she didn't do it? Because like Ross plays him the tape. He's like, oh, there's a mistake. She used like further instead of farther or whatever order it's in. It was a very nerdy thing of him to point out. And he's like, but Jess got like perfect scores on her ACTs and grammar. Like she would never make that mistake. Sir, I can't do the effect and affect all the time. Like, what do you mean? That means nothing. Sometimes people say stupid things. Like, he has really no point, but for some reason, Ross is kind of like, this is convincing me a little more that she didn't do it. Girl, that is the weakest evidence I've ever heard. Anyway, Ethan is like, I think it's an AI version of Jess's voice, which isn't like super important, but thought I would bring it up about how they like maybe did it. So bestie Liam has been released from the hospital. Yay, Liam. And he goes home and like just finds out his home has been wrecked. And by his home, I do mean his grandfather's home that now belongs to him. But at the same time, Billy has been released from jail. And as her and Casey are walking out, she gets approached by Ross. He's like, hey, I've been told that you might have killed somebody, basically. And was like, da-da-da-da-da. And like, they're just very unhelpful. And at the same time, our lovely little group of three up here, Orin, Tasha, and Jess, have crossed the border into Mexico. And upon entry, Jess is told, welcome home, by the border guards. So, woo. This part of the show is like super jumpy, so I do apologize. Liam is trying to call Jess, but has had no luck because no one, and by no one I mean Ethan, because he's the only one still there, has yet to tell him that Jess has left and gone to Mexico. But he's at work. And while he's at work, he learns that his singing act like was recorded at Graceland and has made him kind of internet famous. So at work, his boss is like, hey, I don't want you to bartend. I want you to sing. You better go sing. I've been trying to contact you for a couple days while you were in the hospital. You need to go sing because like people are ready to hear you. And he sings a new song, and it is about Jess, which is kind of cute. While this is happening, lounging in Mexico, basically, until they can go into the prison to visit. Oh, also, I'm really bad at telling the story. Did I say Jess has both of the boxes now? Like she stole those. I feel like I said that. I have to have said that. Anyway, they have but 2 of the 3 boxes with them in Mexico. After Liam's little song is done, because we don't see all of it, he gets approached. And who is he approached to by? None other than Mr. Miles. And Miles is like, oh my god, I had to pull you out of the river to like make sure you lived. Your grandfather was in fact murdered. I don't want to do this anymore for Billy. I'm on your side. But Liam obviously has a very hard time believing him. However, Miles does give him his phone back. Ethan has now shown up in Mexico. Ethan's there too. And tells the group about the fake recording. And that's about it. Why'd you come? Could have been a text. Ross is now laying out her theory that she thinks this is all connected to this big treasure hunt and that Billy is the real villain. And Hendrix tells her, absolutely not. We have a recording of Jess saying she killed somebody. Go get her. Jess, who has now heard the tape, is like, oh my gosh, I can use this to probably help Salazar, like get Salazar to help us. Let's go. And so they go to their prison visit. She originally goes in under the cover of trying to be a journalist, but when the guard's like, no, she goes, okay, he killed my dad. Because she believes Salazar has killed her father. Actually. And the prison guard's like, okay, I'll let you in now to go see him. Okay, whatever. But like, so they sit down and she sits down to meet Salazar. And who is Salazar, you may ask? Who is our little friend over here? It's none other than Rafael Rios. She sits down, and it is her father who is alive. The reason he is in prison as Salazar is because when he robbed that bank, they just assumed he was, and he figured he was safer if they kept assuming he was Salazar, and like it would keep his family safe. So, who is Salazar? We don't know. Because the Salazar in prison is not the real Salazar. But he also proves to Jess that he is in fact her father by singing a refrain from a lullaby, because first he recognizes her necklace. At this point, he learns that his wife is dead, and then Jess gets really mad, and she's like, oh my god, you were just in prison this whole time? I thought you were dead. Like, why weren't you there? And she basically is like, yeah, my mother said you were kind of the worst. And you know what? I could have had a father. And that's, like, the worst part of this. But Raphael reveals that when he broke into the bank, the third box was not there. But gives her this cryptic clue about where she might be able to find it. After exiting the prison, Jess kind of has a meltdown and is like, I've done everything my mother told me not to do. Like, why did I do this? And, like, tells everyone that her father is in there and it's not Salazar. So they're like, we've come so far, we have to finish at this point. Like, you crossed the border. So they decide to finish, and they're trying to figure out the clue. Liam, who has gotten his phone back and it is now charged, finally hears the voicemail Jess left and knows that she is in Mexico. But when he tries to call her, her phone goes straight to voicemail because Tasha made the group all use burner phones because the FBI is looking for them. So, this is a long episode. The group finds out that the clue leads them to a convent full of nuns, and they're like, okay. So they go to visit because they do tours and stuff, and they end up finding the box like in this old organ because it's like one of the oldest things in there. They're like, it has to be this. So that while they're playing it, the nuns are like, they can hear this, and like also originally they're like, what song do we play? And they all are like, the one smart thing Ethan does in the show is like, maybe it's the lullaby Jess's mom sang to her as a kid. So they play that. The nuns can hear it, and they start coming, and like they get the box out and everything. But like as they leave, the nuns are like, what was it? Like, what were you doing in there? And like Jess just straight up is like, I'm not lying to nuns. So she tells them. But when the nun sees her necklace, she's like, oh, I get it. Like, the box is in good hands. Bye, have fun. Because the nuns are a sect of the Daughter of the Plumed Serpent. So with all that, they now have all three of the boxes. They open them all, and it creates a map. And they are unable to read this map because, you know, it was created in a very different time period. But they eventually come to the conclusion that perhaps they should go talk to Raphael again. And so they do that. And just back in Baton Rouge real quick before we end the episode, Liam has decided he will in fact take Miles' help because he's kind of alone. He's out of friends. Everyone's in Mexico. So they go back to visit Raphael. And as Jess is waiting in line to talk to the guard, she sees Billy. And she's like, oh, this is bad. We gotta go. So they leave, and like Jess is like, we have to break my dad out of prison. That is how they end the episode. Jess is like, Billy's in there. Billy's gonna know it's my father. We have to break him out of prison so she doesn't have him killed. That's how episode 7 ends. So episode 8 is all about this prison break to get Raphael out of prison. And starts with Billy sitting down to realize that the Salazar in prison is Raphael. And she basically gets really mad at him about supposedly killing her brother, to which he goes, wasn't me, didn't do that. So she basically is like, I'm gonna kill your daughter now that I know you're alive. and he is very concerned. So while the gang is trying to figure out how to do their little prison break, Oren, because he's a sweet little boy, goes, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I can't do prison break. And they're like, that's fine. Go home. Like, they're very supportive of him. They're like, it's totally fine. We get it. That's like a line you won't cross. But like, as he's getting ready to walk out the room that they're staying in, he goes, by the way, did you know the US was like the last country in the world to update their prison systems after Hurricane Katrina for like flood stuff? Fun fact. And leaves. And everyone's like, oh my God, he's so right. We can get in through the sewers if we just bypass all like the flooding system stuff. And so that's their plan. That's how they're gonna get in. Back home in Baton Rouge, Liam learns that Billy's tracking everyone via their SIM cards. So, and that she was watching his grandfather for like over 10 years. They're discussing about how they're gonna get, like, who's going in to the prison, right? Ethan's like, let me do it. I'm a lawyer, like, I should be the one to do it. And Jess is like, it's my father, why would you go in and do it? Like, that's kind of a dumb idea. Tasha has figured out how to access the sewers because she's smart and wonderful and brilliant. So Jess goes in, she's got like 20 minutes or something. She goes in, and when she gets to her father's cell, no problem, finds it open and empty. And as she's in there, a guard catches her. But her father jumps out of the shadows and incapacitates him. So after that, an argument between Jess and her father breaks out. And like, they basically run out of time as they're trying to get out of the prison to use the tunnels. So they have to switch to plan number 2, which they just didn't know existed going in. And it is Raphael's original escape plan. And he goes, yeah, I would have done it earlier, but there was no one I trusted enough to do it. Okay. So during this, back at the van, because Oren left his van, he flew home. Tasha and Ethan have a cop pull up, and he's like, hey, like, you guys can't be here because they're like right next to this prison. And he's like, but I know why you're here. And they're like very scared he's gonna like arrest him. He goes, this isn't a makeout spot. So they have to pretend to be newlyweds, which I find really funny because there is zero chemistry here. And it was so entertaining for me. But back to Raphael, he basically reveals that his plan is that they're gonna basically, one of them's gonna have a little piece of mirror and blind the sniper in the guard tower. And the other one's just gonna run across the field and cut the fence fast enough and hope they don't get shot. That's the whole plan. So Jess has to do the running half, and she makes it across safely and starts cutting. But at one point, Raphael's mirror gets dropped and breaks. So that's a big problem. So as he's walking out to draw the guard's attention, somebody else shoots the guard. Like a third party shoots the guard. And they are not sticking around to see who that third party was. They run, they escape, they get in the van. And like, she has to basically just introduce him to these two, and then they go off and hide. Like, they get out of the prison. Oren gets home safely, and is like hoping to hear from Tasha, who like knows where to call him because he's using his real phone again, or a burner or something. And like, he's waiting for a message from her when he runs into Agent Ross, who is like, hey, where are your friends? And Oren's like, oh, I don't know. Ross knows they're in Mexico. She knows where they are, and she's like, you're lying to me, aren't you, basically. So Miles and Liam are now the little dream team over here. They figured out a plan to break into Billy's network to basically find Jess. So part of this plan is that Dario, who works for Billy, is going to come to do what he thinks is a job of killing Liam. But Miles jumps out, sedates him, and they use his phone to search through the security network to find Jess. Hendrix finally finds out that they think Jess is in Mexico City because Ross was like, I've got a feeling they're in Mexico, like a very solid feeling. Time to tell Hendrix. And he's still happy that Ross found the killer. She's still having doubts. So now, back down in Mexico City, Jess and Raphael have separated like go find the one last thing before they like find the treasure basically. And Tasha and Ethan are like, okay, we're gonna go home, and they're taking the van. So I know the van's tracking movements isn't important, but I just thought I'd state they're taking the van. That's like it. Their entire plan is they're gonna meet in Baton Rouge. Like somehow Jess and her dad are gonna get across the border. During this time, Jess also sees a video of Liam's song, which is kind of cute because she's very flattered by it. Back to the Liam and Miles plot. Liam learns while looking through these files that Billy's been looking at his family for years, and it's probably the reason his father is dead. So, but Billy, who is on her plane, has seen that Dario has accessed these files, and they're like, that's weird. That's a little weird that Dario would open those files specifically. So, she calls him, and Liam answers. So she basically is like taunting him a bit, and like during this time Casey calls a cleanup crew to go over there and basically take these two out, right? So when they get there, like a fight breaks out. Liam gets out alive. Good for him. But Miles over here, poor boy, shot and dies. So he gets a little X. You redeemed yourself, though. But he's dead too now. Like, he has now found out a bunch of information, and Miles is dead. But Miles redeemed himself, so we're proud of Miles. Jess and Raphael stayed behind to go into the desert to look for a tree, I guess. That's important, because that is where Raphael hid a journal he had with a lot of information about the treasure and the treasure hunt. This tree is important. It's used for like weddings, funerals. So like it's a very safe place because it's not like anyone like goes into the tree. But Jess recognizes it from a photo of her mother and father from when she was a baby. And Raphael basically explains how him and his wife met, which was because he went to her because she was an expert on Maliche, and that is how they became involved. As soon as these two cross the border, they are arrested by the FBI. Shock. And back home, Oren is shocked to see Liam in his apartment, basically, and like confirms that Jess is in Mexico to him. Because like Liam's just there after Miles is dead. Jess has now shown her father the treasure map, which shows the location of the treasure by using this constellations, and they use a mapping app, like a constellation app, to like track it, I guess, and it leads them to a location outside of Vicksburg, Mississippi. At this point, the man who's been following them around, this weird bearded man, shows up, and he like just shows up and is like, hey, here's all this information. Salazar is the name given to the leader of a group of treasure hunters, and they are also looking for this treasure, and he's basically like, hey, quit looking for it. But like right after he says that, is killed by Casey. Raphael is like, Jess, you better run and hide, but Billy grabs him and is basically like, Jess, if you don't come out right now, I'm gonna kill your father. So Jess comes out, and they are now her prisoners. That is the end of episode 8. Episode 9. Billy knows that Raphael's journal exists because she was using a bug at some point. I think she put it in Raphael's shoes from when he was in the prison. So she is like, basically like, I know you have this journal that's important. Let's go. But Jess, as they get captured, manages to hide a phone that's Ethan's. So they still have a phone. So back home, we're trying for FBI help part 2. This time, Oren and Liam, the besties. I love these two. Everything they do together is beautiful. I adore them as like a little friendship couple. They're at the FBI, and they're like, hey, here's our side of the story, Ross. And Liam is like, hey, Miles' body's in my grandfather's house. Can you like go get it and like take care of it, please? We were in a shootout. And then Ross goes, hey, there's no body there. And the door to this clue room, not there either. And they're just like, ooh, oh my gosh. And so at this point, Oren's like, okay, I've got to do the one other thing I can. And is like, hey, you remember when my friends were like, he's been kidnapped? I was. And he's like, and I will take a polygraph test to prove it. Like, I'll do that for you. So he does that. And at the same time, as these two are like willingly in the FBI, these two are brought in for interrogation. And during Tasha's interrogation, Ross is like, says these things about Tasha's grandmother, who was an activist in the 60s. And like, I think that this is partially set up for season 2, but that happens. And it's like, this is like her appeal to Tasha to be like connecting to her family's roots. And like, she then tells Tasha that Oren passed his polygraph test. So like, she knows a lot. She knows a lot about what's going on. She wants to help Jess, and she doesn't believe Jess killed him. But Tasha will not say anything. And to like show how much she wants to actually help them, Ross releases everybody and gives Tasha a card and is like, hey, call me if you ever need anything. Like, if you should ever change your mind, just call me. Let me know. After that meeting, they're in the impound trying to get Oren's van back. And they find out, everybody else who wasn't there finds out about Raphael and Jess's plan to sneak back across the border. And they very quickly realize that that is not going to plan and that Billy has Jess. And so Tasha reveals that she will be able to track the phone Jess has because it's not Oren's, it's Ethan's, which is good. Back on the plane, Billy's like, I know you know where the treasure is, guys. Like, what's going on? And she's like searching his journal for clues. And so at one point, and during this, Jess is trying to turn on the phone so that Tasha can track her. But Billy ends up finding the clue in Raphael's journal, which is a hidden needle. However, Jess is also able to successfully turn on the phone. Back home, Ross goes to lunch with Zeke. They're like a thing now. They're kind of dating. She's like complaining that she's hit a dead end in the case. She's like, what should I do? And Zeke's like, go find Billy. Like, if you think Billy's the killer, go find Billy. Like, don't worry about this lunch, basically. And she then also is like, by the way, there's like supposedly a body that was at Sadusky's house, but like we didn't find any when we went. And he's like, but did you check for bloodstains? So they're leaving their date to go look at bloodstains. Cute for them, I guess. Casey has now discovered that Jess had a phone, but pulls a SIM card out right after Jess was able to send an SOS. And at the same time, Billy figures out what the needle's for. So she rips the necklace off of Jess's neck, opens it, because it's kind of like a locket almost, and figures out that the needle fits in it, and it makes a compass that should point them towards the treasure, because everything's magnetic somehow, and I don't know how they set this up, and it bothers me. But moving on, Mina, or Queen, gets the SOS text, because it was Ethan's phone, so it would be weird if anyone else did, and she calls Oren, and she's like, hey, what's up? He's not answering his phone. Is everything good? Ethan gets on, he's like, yeah, that must have been Jess. Jess had my phone, because they tell her basically what they can without telling her too much. And she's like, here, I'll send you the location pin. Like, totally cool, I get it. Like, Jess is in trouble. During this time, she is at karaoke at Stinky Pete's, and her friend does hang up on them when she sees that she's talking to Ethan. And that friend's an ally, and I love her. But she helps out, and they are basically able to figure out that Jess is on Billy's plane, and they figure out where it will go. These two, Ross and Dr. Zeke, enter the home. They look for blood. They find Miles's blood stains on the carpet, like with black light and stuff. But Billy has sent some more goons over to like double make sure. So Ross pulls out her gun to like arrest him because she's like, this is a crime scene, like you can't be here. And they have a shootout. They kill one of the guys and the other one flees. So this gang here, Sans Jess, is driving to Vicksburg, in Mississippi to be like, okay, we're gonna go help Jess. And Oren and Liam are being besties in the backseat, and they are figuring out clues from Liam's grandfather left in another journal. So Raphael and Jess know where they're going. It's called the Devil's Swamp. And they're like, Jess and Raphael are like, based on our previous experience, obviously there's going to be traps. So, like, let's use them. Let's use them to our advantage and use them to escape and, like, get the other people off track. So that's their plan. Tasha, on their little drive over, finds out that Billy has this whole private security force with her, which is not looking good for them. But they still can't figure out where outside Vicksburg they're going. But Oren goes, obviously they're going to the Devil's Swamp. It's like the Bermuda Triangle of Mississippi. Look at us, you're just pulling out all the fun facts today. Good for you. So that's where they're going. They're all going to the Devil's Swamp. Ross is still upset about what has happened over the course of her investigation. And Hendrix is like talking to her when she receives a video of Jess with Billy from Tasha. And now Hendrix is like, oh, I will give this my full attention. Because Jess is in that video. These four are kind of just being guided by the artifact going through the swamp. Back in the backseat of the van, these two crack the code to Liam's grandfather's journal or whatever, and they find out that Billy is a part of a group called, I'll put it on screen because my Latin is not that good, Cras Est Nostrum, and they are a group of treasure hunters, but they aren't treasure hunters to keep treasure. They destroy the treasure, and their leader is given the name Salazar. So Salazar is the leader of Billy's group she's a part of, but it's not Billy. Ross and Hendrix have found Billy's plane and where it landed. They searched the plane, right? And they found nothing. So Ross calls Tasha, and Tasha's like, go to the Devil's Swamp. Like, that's most likely where they're going. Hendrix is just like, so what do we do now? Because it'll take a lot of time to get guys out here. And during this time, he pulls out a thing of Tic Tacs. And as he does this, Ross notices that they're orange Tic Tacs. And she is like, Sadusky had orange dye on his hands. It was determined it was like a food dye. Probably forgot to mention that too. But like, and she puts it all together that Hendrix might have killed Sadusky. And so she pulls a gun on him. And like, he is very shocked about this all happening, but like complies because he obviously doesn't want to be shot. And she starts laying out all her little details of her little case, and it's like, this is why I think you're the villain. And like, this is why I think you've been pushing me to arrest Jess, because you did the crime. So he basically just denies all of this, and she makes him handcuff himself to the railing, and then heads off to the swamp alone. As she does this, she's on the phone with Zeke, and he's like, hey, don't do this, you're gonna get killed. And she's like, I have no other choice, and I can't tell anybody because I don't know how much higher than Hendrix this goes. Like, I can't, like, I have no one to tell. So she is going off on her own. Jess and Raphael are starting to get worried about what's going to happen. Because they're like, we're probably going to get killed. But Billy's like, don't be like this. You're going to help find the great Pan American treasure. It's all going to be fine. And then as they're doing this, they're on a dock, getting ready to get on boats. Agent Ross comes out and is like, tells everyone to freeze. She has her gun pulled. And just as things are looking up for them, she is stabbed through the stomach with Cortez's sword. Drops to the ground, dead. So Agent Ross is also out of the picture. And as the camera pans up, we see who has stabbed her. Hendrix. And as Raphael sees Hendrix, the flashback from the very first episode comes back, and we see it from Raphael's perspective, where as he is fighting the men in this burning house, Hendrix comes in, and he is Salazar. This is Salazar. Big reveal. That's the big reveal for the end of episode 9. Okay, episode 10, last episode. Lots going on in this episode. So we start back at the dock, and like Billy's just kind of mad that he's here. She's just like, what are you doing? And he's like, look, I had to. And he's also kind of annoyed because he's like, why are Jess and Raphael alive? And Billy's like, I wanted to keep them alive until we found the treasure, just in case they can help. And he's like, okay, fair enough. So they all get on a boat to go into the swamp. The other 4 arrive at the boathouse, presumably minutes after they have left, and find Agent Ross on the ground. And they're just like, oh no. And as they're like looking at her, they're just like, oh no. There's a large guard with a gun at basically blocking their way to get to the boat. And as they're discussing what to do about this, another guard comes up behind him, effectively capturing them. And they're just like, oh no, they're just gonna, and the guards are just like, yeah, we'll just shoot them and throw them to the gators. And the gang is like, worst oh no yet, oh no. And just as Oren jumps in front of Tasha, because he loves her, and that's really cute, who shoots the guards? Ross. Ross is not dead yet. There's still tape on her. Ross is not dead yet. She's alive, baby. Barely, but she's alive. She shoots them, and basically everyone's like, okay, we need to take care of this. So Tasha and Oren are like, okay, we're gonna get her in the van. We're gonna get her to a hospital because there's no reception. So they have to drive until they get reception. And Liam and Ethan are like, cool, we're gonna go after Jess. So that's the group split now. Cut to the boats. Hendrix is like, I should have never doubted you, to Billy. You're doing better. But soon the motor cuts out on the boats, and everyone has to start pushing with like poles, kind of like gondolas. And that is exactly what Ethan and Liam have been having to do the whole time, because their boat did not have a motor. As Tasha is trying to keep Ross from bleeding to death at the van, she tells Tasha that Hendrix is who killed Sadusky, so somebody else knows. So they get into a thing of fog, and Billy's like, we're just keep going, we have the compass. But Raphael, to try to spook everyone, and like with Jess's help, is like, this is the fog of death, we're all gonna die. But like it doesn't work, because they're like, okay. And Ethan and Liam are now also in the fog and are following behind. But Billy's boat has hit a sandbar, so they try for a minute to get it moving and effectively decide they have to get out and walk because they're near land. So during this time, Jess is like, to Hendrix, she's like, you're an FBI agent, you took an oath, like, how could you do this? And he's like, I can do this because this company, we are the good guys. Like, we are the good guys. When secrets of the past get uncovered, it causes unnecessary problems. So we're here to make sure those don't happen. Basically saying that they destroy the treasure to keep it from changing history. And Billy jumps on and is like, yeah, there's nothing more dangerous than the truth, and this Pan-American treasure will cause a political powder keg. In that their group just basically works to keep the status quo. So as this is happening, they have exited the boats and they are now on foot. And as they are going down their path, they notice it is lined with stones and evidence of past people being there, including skeletons, some being from conquistadors. And while they're wondering like how they got there and why does it look like they fought each other, one of the guards goes over to this statue that has a coyote on it and gets gassed. And this gas basically just causes him to hallucinate and start trying to fight everybody. But Casey shoots him, but herself gets shot in the process. But she, like, puts a belt around her leg and, like, soldiers on. So during this whole distraction, because Raphael and Jess know that coyotes are, like, tricksters, they escape and they run away ahead down the path. Their new goal is to basically find the treasure and just get as much out as they can before the other group comes in and destroys it. So they find a Mesoamerican statue that's pointing 2 ways, and based off of their knowledge, they're like, we're gonna go left. So that's the way they head. Cut back to our van. Oren is, like, speeding all the way down this highway to, like, to get the perception so that they can call for help and stuff. And Tasha, who hears Ross's phone goes off, and she, like, picks it up, and she's like, oh my god, and answers it. It's Zeke on the other end, and she's, like, panicking, and she's like, hey, this is what's happening, because Zeke was just worried about Ross, because he hadn't heard from her, and Tasha, like, explains everything to him, so he also now knows. Liam and Ethan are trekking behind Billy's group. They finally get the dead member at the coyote statue, and they keep going on. So Billy, Hendrix, and Casey are now the only 3 left from their group. Get to the same statue that Jess and Raphael found, but aren't sure which way to go. But they see a piece of Jess's jewelry on the ground, and they're like, obviously that's the way they went. They go to the right. If you remember, Raphael and Jess went to the left. So that's the way they're going. Because the compass was telling them to go both ways. Back in the van, Zeke is on the phone with Tasha and is basically like, okay, you're going to perform, I think it's a tracheotomy, where you, like, stab some, I'll explain it. She does this procedure with a metal straw because you have to do it with something sharp and hollow. And she stabs Ross in the chest, basically alleviating the pressure of her flooding, like, her lungs are filling with blood, alleviating the pressure so she can breathe. And Zeke is, like, trying to talk her through and, like, prepare it, and then Tasha just, like, does it, like, she does it, and Ross is, like, suddenly able to breathe again. Back in the swamp, Jess and Raphael are, like, they find the location. It's kind of a little building, and they are walking towards it. Cage falls on them because they step on the wrong stone. So they're caught in this trap, right? And as they're caught, Jess is like, this is how we die. So close to the treasure, but unable to find, like, actually see it and save it. And, like, they have kind of another bonding moment about, like, how their lives have been, and, like, how Raphael shouldn't, like, basically be like, I'm the reason for all your misfortune. But because she had a good life, like, with her mother, and they really, like, connect. And then who shows up but Liam and Ethan? They find them, and they work together to try to lift the cage. Billy, Hendrix, and Casey are avoiding traps on their side of the path they took, and I kid you not, I, like, double, like, checked my knowledge with a summary website, right? It says that Raphael, Liam, Jess, and Ethan use elementary school science to create a lever to get the cage up off the ground so they can get out from it. Back in the van, these 2 manage to get Ross loaded into an ambulance, and they're trying to figure out what to do next, and they're just like, it'll be half an hour at least for the police search team to get out there, so we just need to go and help. So they are now driving back again into the swamp. How much gas does this van hold? Oh my god. A lot of the rest of this takes place in the swamp, so now everyone is free from the cage. Liam is, like, updating Jess, and he's like, my grandfather was killed by Hendrix, and, like, Billy's gonna destroy the treasure, and Jess is kind of like, yeah, we know about the treasure thing, but we didn't know about your grandfather. Wild, so sorry. And they're all like, let's go into the temple. But at this point, one of them has a brain, and he's like, I should go back and get the rest of the group so everyone else can get back here. Like, so, like, when the police come, they know where to go. So Ethan leaves to go do that. So it is now just Raphael, Liam, and Jess going into the temple. Back with the Billy group. Casey's wound is slowing her down. Like, a lot. And before Billy could even stop Hendrix, he just shoots Casey. It is like she was slowing us down. So, R.I.P. to Casey. You were loyal, and you were very loyal to Billy, and I like respect you for that. But Casey is now also dead. Shot by Hendrix. Hendrix is like 2 for 3 on the body charts right now. He thinks he's 3 for 4, but we know she's still alive as of right now. And like basically is like she was liability, and like all of this reminds Casey of her conversation with Raphael back in the prison. When Raphael is like, yeah, Salazar killed your brother. Because, like, this whole time, remember, Billy believes that Raphael has done it, but Raphael has stayed adamant that Salazar killed him. She kind of confronts him about it. And Hendrix is like, yeah, I had to because, like, he wouldn't have survived and he was slowing us down. But, like, as Salazar, I have to make hard decisions. Like, that's why I have the title. And in, like, a split-second decision, Billy takes Casey's gun, shoots Hendrix. Hendrix is now also dead. And after doing this, Billy proclaims that she is now Salazar. In the temple, Raphael sticks his hand in the mouth of a statue to open a latch to, like, let them in. They get in, they find this big grid where it's basically like, you gotta step on the right squares, otherwise these rotating columns will turn and, like, shoot arrows at you, right? So it takes just a little while to figure it out, but you have to find the 3 snakes that represent each of the ancient empires, Maya, Inca, and Aztec. And the issue is most of these symbols are, like, far across the room, so you kind of have to jump to get there. And they are jumping, and they get it, like, just in time before they are killed by these rotating columns. And doing this, they enter the treasure room, and they're just kind of like, oh my gosh, this is all the Pan-American treasure. Like, this is so cool. But, like, the door to the treasure room closes. Behind them, Billy has entered the temple and stumbles upon the trap. And basically, the group is wandering around. They find all this interesting stuff, like tapestries of Maliche and stuff. And just as they are like, oh yeah, we got locked in, how are we going to get the treasure out? Explosion happens. Everyone comes to. Who is standing there? Billy. Kind of iconic, honestly, to just blow it up to get in. Why not? You're already trying to destroy the treasure anyway. Like, good for her, you know? So Billy has blown it up to get in. They kind of wake up and they just see Billy threatening Jess, basically. But right before she can set fire to the whole place, Jess, like, throws, it's called, like, a sling, I think. It's the thing where it's, like, 2 heavy metal balls on, like, a string, and you, like, throw it around, like, animals' legs to, like, trip them. So she does that, and then Ethan shows back up, but this time he has a gun, holds Billy at gunpoint, so, like, she really can't escape. So, like, it's over. It's done. Ethan explains that he was going for help, but, like, he saw Billy, and decided to have followed her. It is like, oh, I left a smoke signal for help, because on their little trip in, Liam and Ethan, they were talking about, like, being Boy Scouts and how, like, Ethan made it all the way up. So Billy gets kicked out in handcuffs, but, like, everyone else is, like, exploring the treasure room, and they're like, this is so cool. So cut to, there's, like, a cut scene. A short time later is, like, the amount of time given, and they are at the opening of a new exhibit about Maliche and like her contributions to the Daughters of the Plumed Serpent and like the Pan American Treasure. And we see in this cutscene we also see things like Jess got to meet the president, Ethan I think finished law school, Liam's like doing well in music, like everybody's doing well. We also see that Ross and Zeke went together. Cute, good for them. Also, relationship update. These two are back together. These two are still dating, Jess and Liam. So Tasha and Oren are kind of back together. Jess and Liam are dating. Ross and Zeke are together. Ethan is high and dry all by himself. He has never told Jess he likes her. And of course, he's alone. His wife is dead and Billy's in prison. So they're just like, they're all going through this exhibit and they're like, this is so cool. I'm so glad we did this. And they're all looking at a portrait that Raphael drew of Jess's mom. He drew a lot in prison. And Liam shows up because Liam was late. And he's like, hey, I was cleaning out my grandfather's like study and stuff, and I found this cassette tape he recorded with a bunch of information about all of this, right? And Raphael's like, oh, are you going to give it to the curators? And Liam's like, no. And they're like, do tell why. And he's like, there's a second treasure. And basically, and like that sets them up for season 2. So that is the entirety of what happened in the National Treasure Show to an extent. I did love it. It was very good. There were points that felt a little drawn out, I will admit, because we're used to seeing National Treasure as like a 90-ish minute movie. So there were parts where it's just like, we didn't need it to be this long. But like it had to satisfy the TV show. End of season update on the characters that are still alive and if I like them. He's okay. He's growing on me. He's definitely making up for a lot of his mistakes. Billy's kind of an icon and I do kind of love her for that. So like, free my girl, I guess. I mean, good she's alive. I don't really care about these two. They mean nothing to me. Miss Mina deserves so much better and I hope she thrives, even though I know if we get a second season, we will never see her again. Liam and Jess I support. I'm happy they're in this little relationship. Ethan needs to get over his feelings and not ruin this relationship, because if he ruins this relationship, I am going to fight him if he ruins this relationship. And Tasha and Oren, if I remember correctly, are dating again. Kind of into that. Good for them. Love her. She's an icon. He is absolutely my favorite character, because he will say either the dumbest thing or the smartest thing, and either way, it is normally the best thing. But that's my kind of end of season wrap up. Overall, I thought it was really good. 10 out of 10. Would recommend to watch. But yeah, that was my whole little video, and I hope you enjoyed. I hope you had a good time. If you want me to do this again, please just let me know. I know these were a little longer than some of the other things I've made. That's cool, whatever, with me. Yeah. I don't know if I have much else to say, but thanks for watching, I guess. Okay, bye.